Before we begin this video, I just want to point out that right now I'm trying to record this off of getting a little sick yesterday. I don't exactly know what happened. I think I might have just caught like a cold, and if I sound a little bit stuffy, then just bear with me for one. And two, if there's like weird, awkward pauses, that just means I'm like blowing out my nose or like I'm like sniffling or something. So just bear with me. Hello YouTube, welcome back to another video. As y'all know, right, as you can see from the title and thumbnail, I recently beat Persona 4 Golden for the first time. This is, I guess, the second installment in my Persona grind, which is weirdly going backwards. I have a lot to say about 4. I think, like, if you just want a quick TLDR, it's definitely not as bad as I've seen people make it out to be, but it's definitely not a life-changing game. You know, that's what I'll say about that. Let's start off with my initial thoughts on the game. So one thing I know is that out of the recent Persona installments, 3, 4, and 5, 4 is the one I've heard the least about, which is a little weird, but I don't know. I don't know. It's weird. I've always heard, obviously 5 is like the big one that everyone talks about. 3 is the one that's like an oldie but a goodie. You know what I mean? It's like it's still popular. But 4 is the one I don't really hear a lot of people talking about, like at all, which was very weird. But you know, that's it is what it is. Also, I think I mentioned this in the previous video when I was buying these Persona games, but I actually bought both Golden and Portable at the same time for like a $20 bundle. So I technically paid like $10 for this game. From what I remember correctly, I'm pretty sure I got about 80 hours. It took me about 80 hours to finish the entire thing, like the true Golden ending, time skip, everything. Right. Oh yeah. By the way, spoilers. I mean, obviously, if I'm talking about the game that I just played, there's gonna be spoilers, but just to reinforce that. I'm not gonna lie to you, I had such, aside from like what my friends were telling me, the only references I had on my own were like, I remember when I went over to a friend's house, we played the Arena spinoff, like the fighting game spinoff. That's like all I had. That's like the only reason I vividly remember Teddy, because I just remember his design, and he like, I think he's the one that like runs around on skates in that game, something like that. But yeah, other than that, there are like these goofy like AI voiceover Yukiko videos of her just cooking complete fucking nonsense, like putting donuts in waffle makers. It's so random. I don't know what it's. I don't even know what I was expecting at that time. And I remember years ago, someone said that TA's hair, if you look at her hair from behind, it looks like a coconut, and that thought never left my mind the entire time I played the game, and I kind of hate that. So I guess that's kind of like it that I had going into it. Again, I didn't really have much going into this game except for it's just from what I gathered, it's just like not favored like 3 and 5. So you know, it is what it is. So the next segment, which I want to talk about, is the story and the characters. And I want to say this right now, this was the best part of Golden. Like, this was the best part of the game. The story and the characters were all amazing. Obviously, same as 5, and I'm assuming this is the same thing with every Persona game. The initial hours of the game, the more, like, less engaging and more restrictive, like, tutorial section, like, I would say between the very beginning of the game and like halfway into Yukiko's castle, it was kind of a little too like it wasn't that like engaging for me. It was engaging in terms of story, but like you couldn't do that much. So, you know, what obviously you know how it is if you've been around or you know Persona games. After those first couple of hours, things just kind of open up. So, it wasn't that bad. I didn't hate it as much as I did in 5. I don't know, it felt like it was longer in 5, but maybe I'm just being dramatic. Obviously, as you can probably see from the footage, I named the protagonist heebie-jeebies because I have only top tier humor. And I think the biggest overarching thing about the story is that I like that 4 was a lot more laid back and more like a slice of life. Like, I'm only going to mention 5 in comparison to things, but I'm not going to beat down on 4. Trust me, there are good things about this game. We'll get to the bad later. I feel like this game being more laid back was a nice contrast from 5. Like 5, there were a lot of points playing 5 where you had that pressure of like, oh, the whole country's on the line, right? Potentially the whole world. 4 just kind of meant like keep your town in check. Like that was what 4 felt like, which is, you know, it's a little bit lower stakes, but well, it's a lot lower in terms of stakes, But I kind of like that because the game was more laid back. It let me absorb more of those serious moments because when the game got serious, it got serious and shit would hit like it hit me straight in the heart, bro. I remember like there's a couple of scenes where I genuinely felt pretty emotional. Like the easiest ones I can think of is like Nanako's death scare, which we'll get into her character in a bit because I'm not gonna spoil too much on what I'm gonna say about her character, but like she played such an important role in making like I guess me as a player feel like this is my younger sister and I need to make sure that she is okay at all times. So seeing that like hospital uh, death scare that they tried to pull genuinely brought me to tears. I wasn't like ball out crying, but I started like tears were going down my eyes, bro. I took that shit very serious, and then it ended up not mattering, and I just didn't care anymore. There was also like I remember more towards the end, when you confront Maria in the Hollow Forest, like when she's like screaming at the protagonist, like when she's like, "Stop trying to help me," ah! You know, because Marie sounds exactly like that. When she started doing that, I was like, "Oh my god, this woman is like, she is like in pain. She is like forcing herself to get away from us." Aside from that, I would say like the main drawback that I had with the game's overall story is that I feel like the whole finding the true culprit behind everything. I understand having one red herring, maybe two, but it felt like there were like four red herrings. And if I'm just being honest, maybe it's just me, but I felt pretty confident in who the like actual real culprit was until like the very very end. So it didn't really like having all these red herrings like Mitsuo and like having like Mitsuo for example. Oh my god, his character just annoys me. We'll get to that later. He actively he was such a waste. We'll talk about him in a minute. I don't know. I personally didn't care too much for having 85,000 red herrings when I feel like it wasn't that hard to figure out who the true killer was, in my opinion. If you struggled with it, I'm not judging you. I'm just saying I felt like it was kind of obvious just in his behavior, but you know, that might just be me. Touching away from the story for a little bit, let's talk. I'm gonna talk about the characters, which is that I'm not gonna lie, I low key really love the lineup in this game. Almost all of the characters actually feel like closely connected to you as a protagonist. Some of them not so much, but most of them genuinely felt like real companions or real people that you are around constantly, right? Real friends, real family, real companions. And I feel like that was also supported by the fact that these characters felt more real to me than they did in 5. I feel like that's mostly just due to the voice acting. I don't know what it was, but like some examples I have are like Adachi, which Adachi, Chie, Yosuke, Nanako, Marie, etc., etc. Those characters, they did such a good job with like the vocal ranges. Like a lot of these characters had a lot of energy, especially Chie, which we'll get back into. But a lot of these characters were energetic. They had all types of emotional range. It wasn't super one note like some characters felt in 5 to me. And there were still some very one note characters in here. I didn't love everybody. You know what I mean? For example, Mitsuo. I didn't like for example, even in this, like, I didn't like Mitsuo. I didn't like the nurse or like your new teacher or I didn't like Morooka. I didn't like the new teacher. I don't even remember her name. She was the freaky one that hung out with the fat girl. Speaking of the fat girl, Hanako suffered from the super hilarious trope of hey guys, I'm the fat character. Did you guys know I'm fat? That's why I talk like this all the time because I'm fat. That's like all she was, which sucks because she probably could have done something cool, and they just chose to make her like the literal butt of every joke. But whatever, that's teach their own. Izanami, the person, basically the person behind everything, including Adachi's Adachi's powers awakening. They felt so like I didn't like how they tried to do that. How they were like, oh, you remember that gas station attendant you spoke to one time at the very beginning of the game, and they never showed up again? Yeah, that's the true culprit. And it's like that was so bugs, and they didn't even have like a character. They were just there just to infest our town, and then just as soon as we defeat them, they're never mentioned again. They weren't even. I don't know. Their character sucked. That's all it is. I didn't hate Teddy, but I thought he was just okay. I put him in like a B. I thought he was like a B tier. Same with Marie. I feel like I don't know if this is a trend that Persona is gonna keep doing over and over again, but I feel the same way about Marie in 4 that I do about Kasumi slash Sumire in 5, which is that I get it. She's like the new golden character, right? That you're meant to bond with and extra story things ensue, right? But I don't know. I wasn't really as interested in her character like at all. Like it felt like she existed purely to be with the protagonist, like how they tried to push it with Kasumi and Sumire, or Kasumi slash Sumire. I'm just gonna call it Kasumi. How they tried to push that, it's like it's kind of buns because aside from some of her social links, she doesn't really have that much of a connection to anyone else in your team or anyone else that's close to you except for you. You know, I don't know. It was kind of bugs. And yeah, like I said, Teddy just was okay at best. I don't know. From what I've seen online after playing the game, yeah, a lot of people love him, a lot of people hate him. I thought he was just okay. I didn't think he was like a bad character, but he really wasn't like that interesting to me. Also, his social links were just so buns because it was just, oh yeah, you finished this important cutscene, have 3 lines of dialogue with it, and now your rank is up. And it's like, that's okay, sure, man. What was I gonna say? Oh yeah, let me get into some of my favorites. I'm just gonna talk about the top 10. I ain't gonna hold you. So Dojima, as in Ryotaro Dojima, the uncle, right? Him. I'm gonna call him Dojima because Nanako is. I know they're both Dojimas, but Nanako is referred by her name. He's referred to as Dojima most of the time. So bear with me. Do the math. So I liked his gradual character development of trying to become more of a proper father for Nanako and a proper father figure for you, the protagonist. You know what I mean? Obviously, it's very obvious that he's like, a workaholic. And I'm sure, having to raise his daughter all by himself all these years, it probably, it's hard on him. So, good on him for trying to be better, especially towards the end. Yosuke was the homie. This guy was so chill. I'm not gonna lie, especially off the top of my head, the scooter scene, like the one that Hanako broke his scooter and he is just like ball out crying on the ground, was some of the funniest shit I had seen in video games in like a while, bro. That was hilarious. That, and also I kind of like seeing him and Teddy slowly start to bond a little bit more because after a certain, I forgot when exactly, but I know at a certain point Teddy ends up living with Yosuke, and because of that, like they slowly start to grow more of that like that sibling brotherly dynamic. Especially I noticed when you revisit in the time skip, it feels like they just get along a little bit better, and they're just a lot more just comfortable with each other. So that's good to see that type of brotherly love. I still think Teddy is mid. Yosuke was the home. Oh, and also he gotta chill out on Kanji a little bit. I did notice that they were trying to push this vague homophobia with Yosuke towards Kanji, and it's like I get it. This game was made during a different time, but like I hope in the revival they kind of chill out on that. It wasn't really that funny, and it would have tainted the character, but I still think he's a pretty good home. Besides that, Yukiko is one of those characters that low-key surprised me. I don't know why. I thought she was just gonna be very much like. I thought Yukiko was gonna be more similar to Makoto, in which she was just like super uptight, right? The straight man in every situation. But you quickly realize that she's just as chaotic as everyone else, especially when it came to her and Chie and cooking all type of mystery food X meals, bro. And especially when she started like bullying Teddy, that was funny. I'm not gonna hold you. And next up is the protagonist, aka Yu Narukami. I didn't think he was as good as Joker, but I do like that he had this very like blunt, deadpan humor options that sometimes I would choose, and I just thought it was kind of funny. So he wasn't a bad protagonist. I wish he was a little bit more personable, but he's good. He's a pretty solid one. Rise is another one. I thought she was really cool. I like how they tried to use her to represent, I guess, like that toxicity and like being a young female idol, right? They used her to kind of go more in depth on like the downsides of being like a young idol and being overly sexualized in the eyes of many, right? Like that, they did a good job with her, and she ended up being a pretty fun character. I thought she was going to be a little too annoying, especially when she was like, she felt like she was going to be one of those, oh, she's going to just like basically force herself to try and be your lover, which they kind of try to do that, but it was a little more funny as time went on. I thought it was going to be cringe, but it didn't kill me that much. So, it is what it is. And then next up, we have Nanako. I thought Nanako was an absolute sweetheart. They basically made her out to be like your younger sister. Yes, I know she's like your cousin, but they made her out to be your younger sister to the point where she refers to you as big bro or as a big brother constantly, which I thought was adorable. When they had that death fake out, I literally started crying because remember, I like, especially in her voice acting, a lot of the times, especially in like cartoons and video games, especially whenever they need someone to voice act like a young character, it's usually just very apparent. Oh, this is like some grown adult in their 30s, 40s trying to sound like a 6-year-old, which I get that's the point, but like it's usually there's always that disconnect. But Nanako actively spoke like a child. They did a pretty good job with her character. I thought she was sweet. I don't really have any complaints. Now, with Adachi, I think he had a really good personality, and I especially love that the closer you got to finding out that he was the true culprit of all the murders, the more you can literally you can see his character start to change in front of your eyes. You can hear his character start to sound more deadpan and then become more like sinister almost, right? More cynical, right? You can see it in his facial expressions. You look at his portrait and he goes from this like, kind of like this airhead young detective to like an actual like psychotic killer. And you can see it in his face and in his actions. You know what I mean? So, hey, I thought Adachi was sick. I'm not gonna hold you. Next up was Naoto. I don't know. I also kind of similar to Yukiko. I personally just didn't. I don't know why. I just thought I wouldn't like Naoto. Like I feel like out of all of the party members, I didn't even know what Naoto looked like until I played this game. Like out of all of them, I knew what they looked like. I didn't know their personalities, but I literally had no idea that Naoto was like a party member. I thought that Naoto was like an NPC that's like important to the story. I didn't know she'd be on the team, but I feel like she was a pretty nice addition. And she ended up being like the straight man of the group, but even then she still had her moments where she said like out of pocket things. I still remember that quote that she said to Teddy when she said, and I quote, only people have human rights. And then I'm pretty sure afterwards they all like gang up on him, and that was the some dude, that was hilarious to me. And it is nice to see that over time she learned to accept herself and her identity. She felt to me, and obviously I'm gonna be so blunt, I'm a straight dude, so if anyone knows better than me, don't beat me up in the comments. But she felt kind of like this. There was this level of like gender dysphoria I felt like she had, as if she wasn't happy with how she identified in that type of way. But it is nice to see that she slowly started to accept her, like slowly try to accept herself. And especially in the time skip, you can just see based on her just overall demeanor and her outfit. I'm pretty sure in her voice as well, she's a lot more comfortable with herself. I think next up is also, speaking of Naruto, let's go off with her other half, Kanji. I genuinely thought Kanji was unironically one of the funniest characters in among either Persona games that I played. There were so many moments where he just unintentionally just says something that was hilarious. I specifically one of the best things I can remember from him is the when they went to the beach and he just showed up in like the smallest fucking speedo. And I was like, what is he doing? And he was just like, what, man? It's fine, bro. It's not. It's like, dude, I swear I'm not giving it enough justice. I promise you that scene is that whole beach thing was a lot funnier than I made it seem. But I promise you, it's hilarious. Last but not least, we had Chie. Now, I feel like Chie was probably like my favorite character in the game. She was also the character I chose as the Yu's lover. I just thought she was super energetic. I love the energy that she brought, not just to her voice acting, but her whole personality. You see her in battles, she's constantly like jumping around back and forth. Her whole thing is that she has a lot of like kung fu references and all that. So like a lot of her attacks involved a lot of just like a lot of her animations involved a lot of kicking and stuff, and I thought that was kind of cool. That's it on most of the characters. Oh yeah, and then briefly, I guess, speaking of briefly talking about time skips, when they redesigned all of them in the time skips, I didn't hate the redesigns, but some of them were definitely a lot worse than others. I feel like out of all of them, I feel like Chie and Rusei, I guess, aged the best. This is like 1 year in the future. Yukiko didn't change too much, but for whatever reason, she just, her putting her hair up made her age like 20 years. And I was like, how far is this time skip? Until I looked it up and it was 1 year. But Yukiko made it seem like we were playing the game like 5 years into the future. Like she looked way older with her hair up. Teddy, Naoto, and Yosuke just got a haircut. Well, Teddy grew taller, but who cares? Um, and Naoto and Yosuke just like I think Naoto grew her hair out a little bit and took her hat off. Yosuke got like a haircut, and he doesn't wear his headphones on him anymore, which I wish they kept because I thought that was cool. The protagonist didn't change like at all, as far as I remember. Again, Marie just took her hat off, and I don't like Kanji's time skip design. I maybe in like the cutscene it looked okay, but his model did not fit or that hairstyle at all. I don't even mind the color of his hair. It just I don't know. I don't know why they did that. And now I'm gonna move on to the gameplay. And this is mostly gonna be me talking about the dungeons and the battles. The dungeons were so underwhelming, and I'm so sad because after playing around in the palaces in 5, this was such a letdown. It was just long hallways, gimmicks that like individual gimmicks that were usually that ranged from mildly annoying to just kind of useless. And I don't know, they kind of suck. However, I do respect that unlike the palaces, these dungeons felt more connected to you as the protagonist because everyone that got a dungeon in some way, shape, or form was close to you, except for Mitsuo's video game palace. Or, sorry, not palace, Mitsuo's dungeon, which, I don't know, listen, let me talk about that dungeon real quick. That dungeon angers me the most because they took such a cool theme, right? It's a retro, I'm assuming like SNES era video game look and appeal, and they not only kind of missed the mark and they didn't really lean into it as much as I wanted them to, they gave it to a throwaway red herring. Man, I don't know, his dungeon just pissed me off because it's like they could have done so much cool shit, bro. You could have made it so like even if let's get this off the way. This game doesn't have a cover system like 5. That's fine. You don't have like cool grappling hook puzzle solving things like you do in 5. That's also fine. But what I'm not a fan of is if you're gonna make these dungeons super simplified, at least make them like visually cool. You know what I mean? Like the video game felt like such a letdown. The music for most of these dungeons was buns. Like the only exceptions are like heaven, basically everything after from the lab onward. No, between the lab, heaven, and the Inaba, aka like Adachi's one, those 3, the music was top tier. But the rest of them, just I didn't like them as much. I guess Risei's strip club one, that song was okay. I got sick of it, but like I respect that it had that like raunchy funk to it. Every once in a while, you had this weird, seductive like whispering. I thought it was just someone just whispering in your ear, but there are actual lyrics in that song. They're just not that good. But I can at least respect what Risei's palace, or sorry, I keep saying palace, what Risei's dungeon did. But the music everywhere else was still pretty buns, except for the 3 I mentioned. Like, I don't know. Like, they could have done so much better. I understand if Yukiko's castle is kind of a mid-dungeon, right? It's the first dungeon. It doesn't need to have all the bells and whistles, right? But by the time you hit, like, the 2nd or 3rd dungeon, something gotta, like, come up. You know what I mean? I don't know. Like, I wish, like, for example, when you're in Kanji's bathhouse, I kind of wish that, like, maybe like, the gimmick of this palace is, oh, there's low visibility because there's steam everywhere. And maybe if the steam is loud enough, you can't, or no, maybe no. Save that for something else. Like, and this is just my game designer brain kind of clicking, but in Kanji's bathhouse, why not make it so most of the places you're exploring in, it's just covered in like steam, right? You're in a sauna or a bathhouse. So lean into it, like, you know what I mean? Make it harder to see shadows. Make it harder to see where shadows are coming from. Make it harder to explore. You know what I mean? At least make the gimmick there. Or even in Risei's palace. What if, because at some point, right, the few lyrics I was talking about talk about things like, oh, they like the music loud, right? Do that. Make the music, or maybe not make the music loud so it's blowing off your ears, but make it so that way, like, hey, the shadows, like, you know when shadows make that weird, like in this game, like when shadows make like a noise every time they sense you, make that noise hella quiet. Like, make the noise of the shadows get drowned out by the music. Like, you can still hear them, but you have to listen closely. You know what I mean? Like, make that as a gimmick. Or especially with the video game one. I don't like. I think the gimmick in that one was like at some point. I think on like one of the floors, you just go through these weird 50-50 cross-shaped thingies, and it didn't even matter because if you get it wrong, you just go back to the start and you can just do the same thing again and just go the right way. It's not like there's any punishment for not making it to the end of that floor. You just kind of get put back to the start, but you know where all the answers are, so it doesn't do anything. You know what I mean? Maybe that's just me. They could have leaned into like making the UI. I thought about maybe like making it like Mother's UI, right? That's like a game that era. Or even let me look up the first Persona games like UI real quick. Like yeah, they could have made the UI and like they could have made like text boxes in the UI match the very first Persona, right? If we're talking like when did the first Persona game release? Like let me actually check. When did it release? Like the late 90s or something? Yeah, it released in 96. So go crazy. Like, what was that? You making a retro video game? They tried to give him like this half-ass remix of the boss battle theme, and it's like, y'all tried. I respect it. It's an eight. It's you know what I mean. It's very 8-bit, but like, dude, come on. You know what I'm saying? I don't know. I don't know. I just thought they were so disappointing, and I could go on and on. I don't know. I just thought they were really underwhelming. And that's most of what I have to say about the dungeons. They just kind of suck. That was another. Also, speaking of, the battles were also a lot more repetitive. At least in like other when you boot up, when I want to play a JRPG like Persona, I'm expecting some form of flashiness. I'm expecting some form of like cool, I don't know, some cool things to happen. But everything just felt so cheap, you know what I mean? Even the all-out attacks, it didn't feel that strong. You basically just turn into this cartoon cloud ball, and you either one-tap enemies or do like 3 damage because they're resistant or something. You know what I mean? I can respect that at least each of the characters had like a pretty cool animation before they attack, but that's really it. But yeah, overall, I don't even have much more to say about the game. I'm just not that happy with whatever they tried to do with the gameplay. And I guess like the last major talking point that I want to count for, just because if anyone who's new to this channel, I am a game composer. So naturally, I love video game music because I love making video game music. So going into this game, I think I only knew of like a few songs. Obviously, everyone knows Heartbreak because of the meme of the protagonist spinning around in circles. But what was another one that I always heard about? It was Heartbreak and Reach Out to the Truth. Those are like the only ones. And also like the music that got put into Smash were like the only ones that I had to like reference what for was like. Let me see. I wrote down the name of the singer for this game. So Shihoko, absolute legend. Her voice fit the vibe of the game so well, and I'm glad that her work will not go unnoticed. So props to her for going crazy on this OST, because trust me, she did a good job. In terms of like my personal favorites, I do have a decent song. Let me look in here real quick. I feel like some of the common popular ones that people talk about is like, like The Fog, Reach Out to the Truth, Heartbreak, Your Affection, Time to Make History. Or not Time to Make History. Like those are like, I think those are pretty common. But there were some that I personally thought were like severely underrated. Like, there were some songs I genuinely thought were pretty good. For example, like Heaven, like I talked about earlier, Heaven, Secret Base, and Long Way, aka Nanako, Naoto, and Adachi's Dungeons respectively. The music in those was actually pretty good. At least in my opinion. I thought those were super underrated. They weren't as repetitive as the other dungeon themes, and they actually sounded like good songs as opposed to just noise with a chorus. Like it was a lot better with these. Another one is also Snowflakes, which is I think like the music that plays during the final semester, which I personally thought was really nice. I loved Snowflakes. It was a really nice song. Other than that, I didn't really like. There's obviously a bunch more. Signs of Love was really good. I love Your Affection. I think Your Affection, hands down, it's like a top 3 song for me. It's a song that I actively listen to. Your Affection is super good. And then on the other end of the spectrum, like I'm even looking at this thing this list I made. All of the other dungeon music is like no higher than a C tier. Like I did not like most of the dungeon music. And I don't really, what else was I gonna say? Oh yeah, there's a bonus track that you can hear in the game. I hope I said this right. Electronica in Velvet Room. That song is so good, and I'm low-key mad that it doesn't play anywhere else in the game. But yeah, no, I think that I guess that kind of wraps up those big points. So now we get to my final thoughts on the game. Um, I think it's solid. It's not like a mind-blowing game, but it's nowhere near as bad as I've seen some people make it out to be. I still prefer 5, but this game is a pretty okay contender, right? So I look back at my video and I rated P5R like a 9.1, which low-key I think was a little like it was a little low, and I feel like as time went on, I feel like I'd raised that rating of Royal to like a 9.3. Like genuinely, I think that's like a if you're like anyone that wants to get into JRPGs or you want to get into Persona, that is like the quintessential game that you need to get out there and play. So if I gave Royal a 9.3, in comparison, I'll give Golden like a 8.1, 8.2. I think it's a solid game. Again, it's not. I think the repetitiveness and just the underwhelming nature of the dungeons was a huge downside for me, but you still have a game with strong characters, amazing OST, and an intriguing depth to the world building that kind of helped to balance it out. Not that well, because the dungeons were like garbage, but it tried to balance it. Also, like I said, I'm a very budget-friendly kind of person, so again, this game, I'm pretty sure when it's not on sale, it's like 20 bucks. So remember, for me to beat the entire thing and get like the true ending and everything, that was like 80 hours. Paying $20 to get 80 hours of gameplay, of unique gameplay to something, or I wouldn't say unique, those dungeons were kind of repetitive. To play the game for 80 hours to beat everything, that's not bad. And like I always say, at some point in the future, I'm gonna run back to all of these games and play them on like hard mode in the future, just to play them again. So who knows? That playtime might go up higher. I don't know how long it'll take for me to do a hard ending, but we'll see. I don't really know what else to say. So that's gonna be it for this video. So if you guys enjoyed this video, leave a like, subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye bye.